we have the honor today to have Riccardo Illy as a partner in the dialogue, and you have a very impressive CV. Besides running the family firm, you were very active in politics and almost a decade long mayor of Trieste and governor of the Friuli Venezia Giulia, I hope I pronounced it correctly, and member of the Italian Parliament, and also president of the regions, Assembly of the Regions of the EU, and also many honorary degrees and positions. But today I would like to ask you mainly, if you accept that, in your capacity of a European citizen, a concerned European citizen, a public intellectual, and a European citizen who has a lot of experience and very strong views of how Europe and the European Union should progress forward and survive. And since we talked last time, there were a lot of events. We are living in a very fastly changing time, so we cannot avoid to reflect to some extent of the events which we all watched. I guess you too in shock that even the world oldest democracy, 250 years old democracy, scrambled in front of our front of our eyes. And but I still would like to start with the first question is about the EU, the feasibility to escape forward, or once you put it to jump terms from maturity to integration, and if you could elaborate your views, because I believe the EU is a serious turning point. It has to make up its mind whether it will follow this intergovernmental structure or will move towards a federalist structure. And also there is a question also in the recent development whether a union like the EU can be based on heterogenic values, or they have to share the same values. And now, especially with this budget debate, where Hungary and Poland played some very questionable role, shows the conflict in the. You want to refer to Raymond Aron's theory of international relations. He said that can be heterogenic or homogenic values, and it seems that the EU, unless it goes towards as you said, towards a maturity and strengthen its homogenic values, it will drift into a two-tier system where there will be a core and a periphery, and it eventually can lead to its dissolution. So if you could say a few words about this jump, which probably has to happen in the near future.
Thank you. Difficult to say only few words about such a paramount topic.
As long as you wish. As long as you wish.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I feel being a citizen of my city, Trieste, of my region, Friuli, Venezia Giulia, you mentioned, my country, Italy, of the European Union, and even citizens of the world. So I first of all believe in multi-citizenships. I don't think that nationalism has to come back. We already experienced nationalism in the past, and I think we can get rid of it for the time being. And it has to be not forgotten, because we have to remember, but not to consider it as an option right now. Secondly, I would say democracy was a big achievement, quite recent if we think to the story of humanity that lasted millennia. And so democracy is quite recent, and maybe sometimes we forget that we have not only to appreciate it, but also to defend the values of democracy. And here I wanted to say immediately, democracy is not only based on freedom, personal freedom of the companies, of the entrepreneurs, and not only on free elections, but also on the freedom of communicating. So televisions and newspapers, now social media, these freedoms have to be kept if we want to consider a country a democratic one. And finally, the independence of justice. Because we have, unfortunately, some countries which are members of the European Union that forgot these 4 pillars of democracy. And they think they can get rid of 2 of them. So they think they can put newspaper under control, and they can have the right as politicians to appoint the member of justice. And I think this is very dangerous. And I think not only these countries are in danger, but the whole European Union. And so I come to the Union. I think it was really a great idea after World War II, after a century of wars where millions of people were killed, and the population of Europe were normally in war with each other. So after the foundation initially of the steel and coal community, then the economic community, and finally the European Union, we found a long time, first of all, of peace, of economic, cultural, social growth. And again, we have not to forget that this was a recent great achievement. And again, we have to, first of all, defend the values of the European Union, and then, secondly, possibly to strengthen them. Because my feeling is that this great project is still, I would say, stuck in the middle. Maybe not exactly in the middle. We are maybe at 2/3 or 3/4 of the path, but we didn't reach yet the other side of the river. So the European Union is something unusual. You can't find another example in the whole world. So we are not a simple association of states, but we are not yet a confederation, and not to say a federation of states. We made a lot of achievement in the economic sectors, large majority in the labor sector, but not completed. Also, the free market is not yet perfectly completed. The VAT problem is not yet perfectly solved. And there are other fields like the monetary sector, where we made a lot of achievement, but we have to remember that not all the members yet adopted the euro. So the process will be finished, will be completed only when all the members will adopt the euro. But I have to say there are still a lot of sectors where we have a lot to do. Just to make an example, we do not have a real foreign policy as European Union. So we cannot have an importance as a sovereign national entity. And in the main global organization, we are still represented by the single countries and not by the EU. And this is the main examples. And this is an element of not of strength, but of lack of strength of the European Union. So I think that we need to go forward to complete the integration where it is needed, because I really believe in the principle of subsidiarity. So we do not need to bring at the European level the activity, the task that can be better managed at the state level or maybe at the regional or even at the municipal level. But there are some activities, some tasks that would be much better dealt with at the European level. To make an example, defense. We are still depending by the United States for defending our countries. And this is simply ridiculous. Our economy is more important than the American one. We are more citizens in Europe, in the European Union, compared to the United States. So we can, and I think we have to organize our own defense. But that means not having any more 27, I would say, ridiculous small armies, but just one army. Probably it could be smaller than the addition, than the sum of the 27, but it could be much more effective and much more efficient, and would allow us also to have a foreign policy. Because someone think that you can have a foreign policy without having an army. Up till now, it is impossible. And I fear that for some decades on, the situation won't change. So if we want to have a world in, let's say, in the enlarged Europe, that means also in the Middle East and North Africa, and so we need to have a real foreign policy and not depending anymore from the United States. We need a European army. So this would be an important achievement. Then think to immigration. We do not have yet not even a real European policy for immigration, not to say a management of immigration, which is still delegated or just left to the single countries. And we know if you are a country with borders with the sea and with Africa and with the Middle East as Italy, the problems, or Greece to mention another country in trouble with immigration, that means having really big problems. But immigration is a problem of the European Union, not a problem of Italy, Spain or Greece. So it should be managed by the Union. But that means having a policy, but having also a police, for example, a European police, and having an organization to deal with immigration. Before going to Brexit, that is for me a problem in one hand, a threat for sure, but it's also a big opportunity. I wanted to underline the main, I would call it, using a managerial term, competitive advantage of the European Union. We are not a homogeneous population, and this is a big advantage. In the United States, you have two possibilities. the full integration, or what I would call homologation. So everybody talking the same language, possibly professing the same religion, and working with the same style, with the same culture. And then you have ghettos. You have several ghettos. Once there were also the Italian one, Little Italy in New York City. Now that's gone, but you still have ghettos for Cubans and so on. But the main idea of the United States is homologation, is to get all the citizens talking the same language, possibly professing the same religion and so on. We have so long stories they last for millennia. We have more languages, we have more cultures, and this is a big advantage because especially when you need a high level of creativity, putting together people that speak different languages, profess different religion, bring their own different culture, increases a lot the level of creativity. The scientists know perfectly this, and they normally organize these task forces, taking people from different countries, talking different languages and so on. What is still lacking in Europe is a common language, because we need to keep Hungarian, which is a very difficult language, Anglo-Finnish, but I know that with the Finnish language you have no words in common at all. We have Italian, we have French, we have German, we have many languages, and we have to keep them, and we have to be really proud of these languages. But on the other hand, we would need to have a common language. If I go to Slovenia, from my house I can almost walk to Slovenia. What language I'm going to talk with Slovene? Because I only can say a few words in Slovene. Dober dan, and a few other words. I will talk English. So why don't we adapt? And now Brexit, this is one of the opportunity, would allow us to adopt English as a common language to add to our local languages without giving a privilege to one of the members. Then I think that this is the right moment, and I arrive to the conclusion to the first question. This is the right moment to go further with integration, because it was mainly Great Britain that had, as a member of the EU, lot of privileges that was blocking further integration of the EU. Now we have not anymore Great Britain as a member, and on the other hand, we have one member that used to be France, and it is now France, that changed its mind on some very important topics, like defense. Who impeded in the past to organize a European army? It was France. De Gaulle was completely against the idea of a European defense. But also who came after De Gaulle again was against. But finally we have Macron, who is in favor. So we have to take this magic moment to go further. And I think that the idea, the final achievement should be to become a confederation. That means to keep the sovereignty of the single countries, but also to have a better organized level of organization for the system of the European Union. And I think that means to keep the parliament, of course, to transform the council in the Senate, and to transform the Commission in the real government of the European Union. And I think that in this moment, especially when the pandemic will be finally defeated, we will have the right moment to go further with the integration. And maybe in some here we could also reach the United States of Europe as a confederation of states.
Thank you, and I would like to repeat some of the things that you said. First of all, I completely agree that UK's departure is good for them and good for the EU future. And they were a democracy before 1973, and they will remain a democracy after Brexit, and thus a good friend, not a family member, but a good friend of the European Union. But what you said, that democracy is really just a momentum in history. If it is just a tiny momentum, and the following this thought, if you look at the world today, the 2019 Democracy Index shows that only 20 countries out of the 195 are full-fledged democracies. Even the US under Trump fell back to the category of flawed democracy. And that's why I think the EU survival has a global importance, because in the new world order, if you look at the big players, only the EU is a truly democratic world power. If you look at its rivals, China, Russia, all the other big players are not really democratic. Maybe in the future they will be, but currently it is the EU, the only democratic world power. And that's why I think it has a global importance, that it remains a world power, doesn't lose its status as a world power. You said it is beautiful that we are different, cultures, etc. But also we are different in democratic traditions. That momentum is not the same momentum for France or Holland or Hungary, for instance. If for Hungary, maybe I can say 5 years after 1945, before the communist takeover, and maybe 5 years, 10 years after 1989. And unfortunately, this is true to some of the other countries. So pull the EU together with such different democratic traditions and much more acceptance of authoritarian rule. You see, again, in the democracy index, that some of those countries who fell back in the status are actually members of the European Union. And to go forward, the picture that you described is beautiful. I would subscribe to it, of course. But what you do with those who only use the EU for their own political game, the enrichment of their family and oligarchs, doesn't want to respect the rule of law. Look at the EU as an ATM machine, and say, just leave us alone. This is a sovereign country. You can't tell us what to do. With such an attitude, and they get away with it, one case after the other, that the European Parliament, the Commission, they just let this happen, which is poisonous. It's really poisoning the minds and the reputation of the EU. So what is the way forward to have a two-gear, a center and a periphery, or enforce it somehow? What some countries didn't even become member of the European Court and the Attorney General of to investigate corruption, etc. So what you do because if the EU fails, I think this bright future is not only not ahead of us, it will lose its world status very soon. So you're really sailing between Scylla and Charybdis. That, I agree, we should keep all this beautiful diversity of cultures. But at the same time, the EU as a federation, confederation, union should be able to defend its own interest and its own future.
Absolutely. First of all, I would like to remember that the seeds of democracy were born in Greece. So it's not by chance that now Europe is really the sole continent where democracy is really present, developed, even if I agree with you with some exceptions. We know that Hungary and Poland, which is another country where democracy is under threat, were under the communism for a long time, under the Soviet Union. And so we can not excuse, but understand the fact that in these years, after belonging for only a few decades to the European Union, to a really democratic organization, they have, let's say, a wrong moment. But in the other hand, the European Union has its own rules to defend the democracy. Nowadays, they only gave some, let's say, quite soft warnings to Hungary and Poland. But in my opinion, the EU should be very tough in obliging these two countries to respect the values, the principles of the European Union, that are the principles of the human rights, the principles of the state of rule, the principles of democracy. And so if some of the members are breaching these principles, the reaction of the European Union, in my opinion, should be really tough, I would say even rude, because it has to give immediately an example to some other countries that could be tempted to follow the example of countries like Hungary and Poland right now. So we really need to bring again these countries in the path of democracy, and soon. And to do it, I repeat it, we need some tough, even rude action that are foreseen, by the way, by the European, let's say, general rules. And to say it at the last word, we could also arrive to the extradition of countries that don't agree to respect fully the principles of the European Union. So even a withdrawal could be a final, terrible, negative solution. But as you mentioned, to save the democracy, to save the European Union for the rest of the members, maybe that also this terrible decision should be taken. I'm quite optimistic on this, and I'm sure that we won't need to arrive to a withdrawal of some members of the EU. They will stop before and readapt all the rules of democracy, of freedom, of the human rights, and of the rule of law. But if necessary, we have to be ready also to withdraw a country.
And also, the economic structure of the of the EU is very unbalanced. That those countries who are not in the euro regime, they completely can play against the common goal, which is happening, hand out for money, but at the same time playing against the common interest. So you believe that the EU has the equipment or the machinery to enforce its goals and interest with those who are renitent or misbehaving among the EU member states?
We have for sure the rules, so it is foreseen the possibility that one of the members not respecting the principles of the EU can be sanctioned, and the final sanction can be also the withdrawal. So this is foreseen. I don't know if today we have the political strength, because this is needed to act, because having the right rules is not sufficient if you don't act them. We know this very well in Italy. We have thousands of wonderful rules that are never acted. And so in different fields, we also have some problems, not for the lacking of the rules, but for the lack of acting the rules. But to act a rule, you need a political strength. And probably in this moment, the main, and I agree on this, the main objective of the European Union is to fight the coronavirus. And I hope this will happen within the end of this year, that just started. Then, as you know, Angela Merkel is going to terminate his mandate. We will have probably the most important election in one of the European members in the last decades. And I hope that the result of the election in Germany will be clear, will give Germany and so also the European Union members the strength to act the rules, if necessary, against the members that are not respecting the European principles.
Let's be frank. It's not only the political strength which was questioned, but also the political will, because Germany could have stopped some of the developments which in some areas went to the extreme, undermining the EU's reputation in front of the and building up completely alternative realities. And I understand that until the UK was a member, they would have blocked just to avoid the precedent, anything which is reducing the competencies of the national governments and increasing the authority of Brussels. But some critics say, just recently a German political scientist argued that there is also a model where there will be a center, a core EU, which needs its periphery, this dichotomy of a centrum and a periphery. And until they don't cause big problems and serve the interest of the German companies, etc., they let the governments get away pretty much with anything. And this would sort of bridge us over to the next question, that I think it is agreeable that you need a more centralized, institutionally centralized EU, which is inevitably goes together with decreasing national competencies. You have to have a fiscal policy, you have to have a defense policy, you have to have a foreign policy. This pandemic shows that it would be nice to have a Europe-wide medical protocol or a good, reliable media, because the Arab world has Al Jazeera, US has CNN, Russia has Russia Today, China. Just on the EU has the Euronews, which is partly owned, Russian-owned, partly owned by some Middle Eastern investors. So I think the EU really could afford to have something like a European BBC or something, which, if I listen to this, I get correct news about the vaccines or whatever. So the EU needs a more centralized institutional network, but at the same time, some people say, and I'm among those, that together with the centralized institutional structure, geographically, it should be more decentralized. Because if you leave the periphery with the perception and the feeling that we are a periphery, this plays into the hands of Orbáns and the populists, inevitably. So it would be important, I think, to decentralize a little bit. Now, as after UK departure, everything will be on the French-German axis. Strasbourg, Luxembourg, Brussels, Frankfurt, etc. So what is your view? And in some writings I suggested your hometown would be an ideal sort of second Brussels, because this is the most, with due respect, of course it is Italian, but we look at Trieste as not 100% Italian, because there are so many culturally it's so diverse, and so many historical reminiscences there. So what is your view of a more a centralized institutional structure, but a decentralized geographical structure that is not viewed that everything is coming from Brussels?
So it's a very interesting idea, this one. First of all, I wanted to strengthen the idea that we really need a mean of communication for the European Union. That can be something that go in addition to the national television, newspaper, magazines that already exist. One of the reasons that the European Union, that Europe is not so important economically and financially, is because, if you think well, the two newspapers that accounts in the financial sectors are Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. And one is from Great Britain, by the way, controlled by a group which is not British, and the other is based in the United States. But the two are, let's say, of a British approach. And I think we really need a mean to communicate. Also, the European Commission, when they try to tell something, they have not a single mean to communicate. But again, to have a television or a newspaper, you need a common language. And so before adopting a common mean of communication, we need to adopt a common language. And that's the moment to do it. So let's adopt English, and let's found a European television, a European newspaper, and especially in the financial, in the economic sector. because I think that the rules of finance shouldn't be always written in New York City or in London. They could be written also in Frankfurt. Then subsidiarity. I mentioned this principle before, so I perfectly agree with you. There are some more activities that we would need to centralize. Also the one regarding fiscal. Probably with the fiscal sector, I would prefer a kind of coordination rather than a full integration, because I think that having a kind of, let's say, fiscal competition can be good to avoid the tendency to just increase taxes. Having a kind of competition would, let's say, bring the countries willing to increase taxes to keep them at a lower level. But for sure, a kind of coordination is needed, and further activities should be brought at the European level. But other that has been brought or have been brought to the European level could be brought again at the lower level, sometimes even at the municipal level. We have some decisions that are taken in Brussels that could be taken better, maybe at a regional or even municipal level. So the principle is right. We have to act, and to really act the principle at all the levels. And also having the powers, let's say the center of decision of the EU spread on the European territory could be an idea. Now we have the authorities that are based in different countries, but these are not considered political organization or political how can I say, way of acting the programs of the EU. They are much more administrative rather than political. And probably now we need not anymore to have Strasbourg as a second base for the parliament. So the idea of having another base for the parliament, or the idea of having the commission staying in one country, the parliament in another country, the council in a third one, and maybe to have several bases could be a good one. And I agree with you, the Trieste area, which is a point of meeting of population. In this area, the German, Italian, and slave population are meeting and melting. Would be for sure a good area, because here, especially in Trieste, we developed a model of integration. I call it conservative integration. You know that in Friuli Venezia Giulia there are 3 languages that are protected by the law. One is Slovene, the other is German, because we have border with Austria, and one part of the population in the northern part of the region is German speaking, and then Friulano, which is an old language of Latin origins, and is still considered a language, is also protected. But in Trieste you have several more communities, Jewish, Serbs, Greeks, Turks, and so we have 7 different religions, 7 kind of church, 7 different graves for these all these religions. And normally that's the reason I say conservative integration. So even if the people all speaks also Italian, and they normally keep their original language, but they conserve language, religion, culture, thanks to their association. That can be, in some occasion, religion, organization, associations. In some kinds, in other cases, they are related more to culture or to other aspects. But these associations are not only protected by the law and by the local authorities, but also financially supported by the region and by the municipality. And I think this would be an important model. So if our objective is to adopt this kind of conservative integration in the whole territory of the European Union, having in this region, that can be Trieste, can be Ljubljana, can be Rijeka, can be, I'm not promoting my own city, of course, but let's say in this area, having a base of the parliament or maybe of the commission of the council could be important also for the symbolic aspects. And I would also say we deserve it.
Yeah, and you know what you're saying is also important in the sense that I think for a stronger EU, the together with the national competencies, I think the importance of the national governments also should decrease. And this what you described, it would be a great way to preserve this great diversity of Europe, because especially in the eastern part of Europe, some of the borders are really artificial, you know, and unfortunately nationalists still contest the borders. The best would be if they're not there at all, you know, because some of these borders were drawn up in Versailles or Trianon or whatever, and without asking the people. But this regionalization could serve a really good purpose. You know, I give you an example, and I wonder of your reaction. Like in Hungary, I have to bring the example from here. The government, the ruling government, is sort of crusading against the municipalities, including the capital city of Budapest and the major cities where they lost the municipal elections. And since all the funds are coming in through the national channel, national entry, and distributed by a government organ, they absolutely exclude the punishing, literally punishing some 4 million people who are living in these municipalities because they didn't vote for them. Now, if you regionalize the access, you know, to European funds, not going through the national governments, but allowing, let's say, your region team up with a Slovene region and an Austrian region and getting funds directly, is also can depoliticize or separate it from domestic politics, because it is sometimes it goes to the unfortunately my country is now the extreme reference, but what is going on in this sense is really really sad, and it's happening in front of the nose of the European Union. So this strong enforcement of the common rules, but at the same time decentralizing and a little bit cutting out the importance of the national government and looking at Europe as from a truly European point of view, because that, you know, certain regions you know, in Poland and the Czech Republic and Germany, or Hungary and Transylvania, or whatever. They belong more together than they separated by the national borders.
Absolutely right, and I believe.
I can't hear you. Something happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. You don't?
Didn't you cross the little mic sign?
No, doesn't work now? No?
It does, but it's much lower volume. You just maybe have to speak up a little bit.
I don't know what happened.
It's good. It's good now. It's good now.
It's okay. Well,
yeah.
So when I used to be the governor of the region Friuli Venezia Giulia, and also the chairman, the president of the Assembly of the European region, which is an association of more than 200 regions in the European territory, enlarged territory, because we had also some Turkish and some Russian members as local entities that were members of this association. I understood that the glue of the union could be the cooperation between regions at the borders, like in my area, because we have, to make an example, a Slovene, which is recognized, a Croat minority or community living in Trieste, but you can find Italians living in Slovenia and living in Croatia. We have the German-speaking community in our region, and we have some Italians living in Austria. So I proposed, in my mind, I thought, if we organize a Euro region composed by region of Italy, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, we would really, in one hand, be able to better cooperate, but in the other hand, we would help the European Union as a glue to grow and to further integrate. So I convinced at that time Wolfgang Schüssel, that used to be the Chancellor of Austria, and at that time Austria became the President of the European Council. And so we proposed a regulation for the so-called European grouping of territorial cooperation. So local entities of different countries can aggregate and organize this kind of territorial cooperation. After I concluded my mandate, this hasn't been organized by the region Friuli Venezia Giulia. Also the region Veneto was part of this movement, and then Carinthia in Austria, the whole Slovenian territory, and the region Istria in Croatia. They didn't organize at this level, but they did it in Gorizia and Nova Gorica. Gorizia is in Italy, Nova Gorica is in Slovenia.
I know.
And there exists an EGTC, which is a European grouping for territorial cooperation. And it works quite well. And I think we need to promote it. And so to allow the population that have common languages, interest, culture, even if they are living in different countries, to better organize their interests, not only economic, also why not political, and especially cultural interests.
And finally, I would like to seek your view, which you also mentioned a few times, the rise of populism, which we cannot avoid. We We see it in the U.S., and of course, I have faith in the U.S. that it's a strong enough democracy that it will solve its problem. But unfortunately, not all countries are so strong democracies that they can resist this rise of populism. And unfortunately, in the European periphery, we see this rise of populism, a total undermining and dismantling democratic institutions. Also, the destruction of pluralistic democracy, and also undermining European Union values, to the point that at the last election, you're probably not aware of that, but if anybody who came to Hungary was absolutely shocked that we had billboards all over the country with Jean-Claude Juncker and Franz Timmermans and others as enemies of the Hungarians who want to flood Hungary with migrants, and there is almost like the Roman proscription, that they declare, just like in Nazi Germany, they declare someone as an enemy. Recently, a political scientist. I am also one of the candidates who are enemy of the Hungarian people. They forced out the Central European University, destroyed this 150 years old film school in Budapest, and you just list and list these things, and this is all happening. It's not North Korea or Belarus, not an isolated Venezuela, but it's within the European Union. And what the European Union should do this, but somehow most Hungarians are lethargic. They very resigned. They say, until the interest of the core countries is served, they won't do anything about this. And unfortunately, the elections are at the point in Hungary and to Poland in some extent, which are neither fair nor just. The media is completely, it's like a Gleichschaltung by Dr. Goebbels, a complete alternative reality, all the papers, and it's a small country. Even the private channels like RTL, they gave in. They totally eliminated political news. If they has a news program, it's maybe half an hour a day, and the leading news items are I don't know, a landslide in Malaysia, and a zebra was born with two heads in the Sydney Zoo or whatever, and a very little domestic news. So pretty much wiped out the one of the main elements as you started our dialogue, the access to fair information. So some of these developments are more than alarming. They really scary, because they're not happening. And as you said, once it happens in one country, it can happen to another country. Mr. Janza is already flirting in Slovenia with the urbanism, and some other countries. It is the toothpaste. Once it's out, it's very difficult to put it back in the people and the Europeans made this mistake in the League of Nations with Hitler and with Stalin in Yalta. They underestimated, wir schaffen das, what Angela Merkel said. It's not so easy. It is a plague which won't be contained to Hungary.
So first of all, I prefer to call it demagogy instead of populism. because when you use the term populism, some politician, we already had some examples in Italy, can tell you, but populism is a positive term. And they would say they like it because they are interpreting the needs of the population. When you say demagogy, that's more clear.
That's right, that's right.
It's clear that someone is lying to get the interest and the approval of citizens to make something or to, after promising something, to make something that can be what he promised before. That's a big issue. I don't have let's say, a recipe to solve the problem. I think that we should think much more in advance when we see the first seeds of demagogy, and we should really fight it because it's very, very dangerous, as we see also in some European countries. Normally the antibodies works, as we have seen in the United States. So another demagogic president was Mr. Trump, and he was beaten by a person with a completely different, or let's say an opposite approach. I have to add that one reason, in my opinion, that this kind of sentiment developed in the last decade is related with the means of communication, and especially with the social media. Which is the difference between social media and the traditional media? In the second case, you have a journalist. In the television, in the newspaper, in the magazine, you have a journalist that has been chosen by the editor, and probably he has a certain level of education. Of course, he won't be perfect, but I have never written or heard on a TV that the earth is flat. Whereas on the social media, you can find a whole movement of people saying that the world is flat, and others that said that the vaccine are dangerous, and they want vaccine themselves, not even for the coronavirus. This is a big problem that we should solve at a higher level. I don't know how. The sole answer I can give right now is education, or if you prefer 3 words, education, education, and education. Because when you read or hear a fake news, you will be able to understand it's a fake news only if you have a proper education. Otherwise, if you have really a low-level education, you will think, that's right, the world is flat, and vaccines are dangerous, so I won't get them. And this will bring a threat to the whole population, to the whole society. And then I think we need to safeguard the press freedom. And this is one of the problems you have in Hungary. But as I said before, the freedom of communication, of communicating, and so the press freedom is one of the pillars of democracy. And in this case, it should be the European Union, the European Commission that act tough, in a tough way, to change the situation and to act the existing laws to punish the countries that are not allowing the full press freedom. And in social media, probably we are at the very beginning of this new way of communicating. Maybe we will find a solution. The fact that Twitter, for example, blocked the Mr. Trump word on Twitter is absolutely a new fact. So maybe we could also act at a broader level to impede fake news to circulate when they are clearly fake news. Because one thing is communicating freely things that are not harming other peoples and things that can or are true, and another thing is to give the freedom of communicating totally fake news like the one I mentioned before, that the globe, that the world is flat. But this is the big issue.
I think what you said is very important, that because the EU has small countries, and the Union itself has a role to play in this, to get the right, unbiased, reliable information to every European citizen, regardless whether they live in a big country with a solid democracy, or they live in a new democracy with a small media market. I think the EU should spend some money on a European public media which can be available for its citizens. It's not a cheap thing, but if you think of the like the Brexit fake news what went on there compared to the damage which was done, this would be a small expense. And I think I agree with you that it's very important that the every European citizen can make a informed decisions, and the European Union should play a role to let this happen. Dear Riccardo, I thank you so much that you shared your view with us, and I hope that one day we can meet in Budapest or in Trieste or somewhere halfway, and maybe with a good Illy coffee.
I hope so, as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much.